Hiromi and I left Richard at the apartments. The two of us piled into my car and I was driving a few blocks over to a Tiger Claw front operation. From what Richard had said, it was actually a drug distribution center, but it pretended to be a tattoo parlor. Considering how big tattoos were with TC members, I was sure it was also a fairly active tattoo parlor. I pulled up into the parking lot and couldn't help but shake my head. There were times I could forget that the world I was in was a cyberpunk world. When the sun was out and shining, and the streets weren't covered in homeless squatters and trash, I could think I was just in a big city from a century ago. But then moments like this hit me. The parking lot was full of bikes. Mostly Kusanagi, but not every TC gonk drove one. They were expensive after all. The neon of the entire strip mall was bright, covering the slightly rain-soaked pavement in a neon array of color. There were people sitting around outside. Some were TC, some were Joy Toys, or just girlfriends of the Claws. A wild array of colors and skin. Cigarette smoke blew around them, creating trails of gray across their bodies. I found a spot and parked, but I had done it all on autopilot, because I was completely distracted at the sight. I actually stopped and took a picture of the scene. That was how picturesque it was. Motoko? I'm okay, Hiromi, just distracted. Let's go find Carter, I said, stepping forward and leading the way up to the open door of the tattoo parlor. I could tell that we were getting plenty of attention. Eyes from all along the street were on us. Some disinterested, some watchful and guarded. In the end, it wasn't uncommon for teenagers to come to a tattoo parlor, but the fact we weren't wearing TC colors or gear set us apart. I ignored the couple of gangsters that were hanging around on each side of the door as I stepped in and made sure Hiromi was behind me. The insides were covered in smoke and dark lights, the faint noise of the machines that we used to install the neon tattoos the TC loved buzzing in the background. Yo girlies, what can I help you two for? A large man with a smiling face called out. The fact he was covered in glowing tigers made of fire, and dragons swirling around on his skin, the neon tattoos actually moving on his flesh, was a little distracting. Thankfully Hiromi was the one doing the talking. I was just the muscle. I need to find one of the boys that works here. Carter? Should be someone new, Hiromi offered with her best smile. Of course, asking about a single member of a gang? Coming from two girls? Listen, if you need to speak to your boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend, this ain't the place for it, the older man offered, trying to keep a big scene from happening at his shop. I could feel my own nose scrunch up and Hiromi looked about as disgusted. Yeah, not what this is about, Hiromi offered with a look of disgust. He clept something he shouldn't have. I've been asked to get it back. Considering he went and joined up with the TC, I wanted to keep it above board. So can I speak with Carter, or whoever his boss is? Hiromi asked, trying to sound professional and confident. But I could tell she was nervous. There were plenty of TC guys all surrounding us. Huh? The older man said after a moment. He reached up and rubbed his chin, processing what Hiromi had said. Can't say I've ever seen something like this before, he offered before shrugging. But Carter is one of us now. If he clept something, it's now ours, he said with a shrug, and I could see some of the boys hanging around starting to loom over. Hiromi of course noticed as well, and I could see her will wavering a bit. Hiromi still wasn't great with actual violence, even with me at her side. I just want to talk to the gonk, get the car back, and we can get out of here. I'm even willing to throw in some eddies or something else for the time. Not like we care about the weapons he also clept, Hiromi offered, trying to throw out a lifeline. No, the man said bluntly with no wiggle room. Now get lost. This ain't the kind of place you two are welcome in, he said, giving us a chance to leave, and honestly I moved to grab Hiromi to bail, but Hiromi had other ideas. Don't be a gonkass. Just let us talk to Carter so we can get the car back. Then we can Delta. No need to be such a schizo. She cursed at him, her anger obviously overriding her common sense. Hiromi was quite used to yelling at gangsters after all. I don't much like a couple of kids walking into my shop trying to cause trouble for my boys. The man jerked his head and the door slammed shut behind us. Hiromi went suddenly quiet. I realized what was off. These guys weren't seeing Hiromi as she used to be, covered in TC gear. They just saw some corpo kid trying to cause trouble. She looked at me, obviously growing concerned. I just frowned, confused as hell. Were these idiots actually going to what? Attack us for coming to have a conversation about a stolen car? Fuck. The temptation to start firing was there. It might even be the right choice, but I had multiple things I needed to consider. Hiromi being right there next to me in the line of fire. Future dealings with the TC going pretty bad if I shoot up one of their drug distribution sites. So I shook my head to her. Just play it cool, Hiromi, I told her, as I closed my suddenly golden eyes, quickly sending a text. Once I was done, the guys were already on us. You're joking, right? What are you trying to do? Kidnap us? You have no idea who we are. We've been perfectly reasonable with you, I interrupted, trying to put the focus from Hiromi onto me. A couple of arrogant kids walks into my shop and starts making demands. I should be asking you this, bitch. Who do you think we are? The boss asked, glowering as he stepped up, trying to loom over me, his face bending down close. Some TC mid-level boss. Hey. You're gonna want to be careful here, Chum. We came in above board. You won't like what happens if you do something stupid. Make sure why I was trying to tell the guy not to hurt Hiromi. I mean, Arasaka parents wouldn't be happy to learn Hiromi had been hurt by some TC stooges. But the man stepping forward and punching me in the face shut that up. Don't tell me what to do in my own business. Chum, he said, pausing and enunciating the last word mockingly. That was rude, I told him, wincing as my cheek pulled. He hadn't hit me super hard. I guess being a teenage girl did have some benefits, but he certainly wanted to shut me up. Put them in the back, he ordered, but I cut him off. Just so you know, I have connections with the TC. You don't want to do anything stupid, I called out before he could walk too far away. So he turned and slugged me again. Okay, fine. Play it that way. Hiromi was looking a little panicked after I had been hit, but I turned and gave her a wink. I messaged June, I told her, and she looked a little dazed for a second, trying to process what I meant, before it struck her. She almost was able to smile at my words, although her nervousness won out. Yeah. They searched me, pulling out my weapons including my boya. I would be getting that back. Of course the sight of my hand cannon got some looks as they disarmed me, upping my threat from teen to what the fuck. Then we were both pushed into a back room, which was basically just a storage room, and thrown into a set of chairs. A couple of thugs hung around the room glaring at us, but we weren't left alone for more than a moment before the leader stepped in with a younger teenager behind him. There is Carter, I said in greeting. Hiromi and I had been given a picture of the kid from Richard. The fuck are you? He demanded, glaring at the two of us. I don't know these bitches. They said they came for your car. The boss offered, and Carter went from irritable to ballistic in an instant. Bitch. You won't touch my ride, he roared, stomping up to Hiromi and I. Instantly I got his attention to keep him from looking at Hiromi. I really would have to start killing if they touched Hiromi. Technically it isn't yours. It's Morgan's, I said, and got the kid's eyes to lock onto me. The fact he had them glowing red to look more intimidating, along with a TC-style jacket opened on his back, with a bare chest showing off a pretty complete lack of muscles, made the whole situation more amusing than anything. Bitch. It's mine. Fuck you. How eloquent, I commented, which to my lack of surprise caused the boy to react. Fist flung back, I breathed out and tensed my stomach as his fist slammed into my stomach. It wasn't too bad. I coughed and overacted, but it had barely done much to me. That's what you get, fucking cunt. Carter. You don't know these two? Nah. I thought they might be that prick Richard's whores, but I don't know these two. Surprising, I mentioned as I stood back up after fake coughing. I guess you weren't there that night I killed Morgan and Velocity, I told him. Carter looked confused for a moment before it seemed to hit him. Purple hair. That's right. The bitch that fucked up the shooters. That was you, huh? Yep. Hey, he chuckled before predictably punching me again. Motoko. Hiromi called out in horror as Carter punched me across the face. That hurt a bit. My cheek was already stinging from before. I'm fine, Hiromi, I told her firmly as I rose back up, to glare at the kid. That's for fucking up the gang. I was making a ton of eddies there, you know? he said with a glare, but I looked towards the boss. A punk kid that jumps to a new gang the moment the eddies run out. I wonder how reliable he is? I mocked a bit. Enough. I didn't bring you here to fuck up the meet. The boss yelled just as Carter cocked back to punch me again. Well girls, you wanted a chance to talk to my boy, are you satisfied with the conversation? He asked with a laugh, and I just shrugged. My lack of fear thanks to cold blood was probably odd, and fearless chill was in effect. I was kind of curious what their mind was telling them when they realized how utterly unafraid I was of them. That was when the boss got a call. I could tell as his eyes lit up gold for a second. Then his eyes flicked around as he obviously spoke internally. Then he went pale, looked to me. I purposefully gathered some spit in my mouth and hawked the bloody spittle onto the ground. Bastard cut the inside of my cheek. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone was waiting for the boss to act, but things stretched on, as he seemed to be in a conversation. Considering everything. If that's Fujimura, tell him hello for me. I called out, interrupting the boss's conversation, and the way the man jumped like I just stabbed him, I was right. I relaxed back, crossing my arms over my chest and throwing Hiromi a big smirk. Although the fact I was probably bruising up a bit from being punched diminished the comfort it brought. So instead I just walked over and put my arm over her shoulder. That seemed to help, a little. Fujimura-sama is sending someone to properly resolve this incident, the boss says, looking a little pale, and I nod. Probably Jun, my brother. I tell him, and that makes the boss wince even more. I would very much like my gun back. I tell him with a bit of threat in my voice, and he jerks his head, causing his goons that had mostly been watching with sinister smirks to slowly walk over with my equipment, and the stuff Hiromi had on her, of course. Holstering my Boya and Lexington, I felt much better. I did warn you that I have TC connections. I told the man, and he nodded quietly before rising up to this full size and bowing his head. Apologies for this mistake. I just snorted. Let's just wait a bit. I'm sure June is going to be so happy seeing me all bruised up. You're all just lucky I don't go out of my way to murder TC gonks myself. I grumbled, although only Hiromi understood just how much danger my words actually represented. In the end, Hiromi and I were seated back in the shop in comfortable chairs, and the boss had even had some men go out and get drinks for us. The whole atmosphere was tense, and I was just willing to wait for June to show up. Seeing June tear these gonks a new one would be pretty entertaining. Hiromi was regaining her spark, and I made sure to keep an eye on Carter, who was looking pretty nervous now that the situation had so completely altered itself on him. Finally a vehicle roared into the parking lot, and it was moving fast enough I bet it was June looking towards the door along with most of the people inside. I felt my smile slowly disappear into an irritated frown. Hey Akari, I grumbled out as the kamikaze Borg woman sauntered into the tattoo parlor. Hey Motoko, she called out with a big grin. Damn it. I had wanted June. And you, Kato-san? Yes. The boss of the place greeted the Borg woman as he rose up and bowed to her. You fucked up, she said happily, and then slammed a fist into his cheek. Ah, that was Akari all right. Boss. The men around us called out, shocked at the sudden violence happening to them. You touched something that doesn't belong to you. Motoko Kusanagi works for Kamikaze. She has boss Okina-sama's favor as well, for saving his life during an assassination attempt. Akari walked over and to my surprise kicked the man as he was trying to get up. The hell? You bitch, the foo. Shut up. The boss roared at one of his boys that was moving forward to try and defend him. Don't interfere, moron. RC, you do have a brain in there after all, Akari said, smiling with her plastic face. Motoko? You alright, kid? I'll live. They got a few licks in, but I'm mostly irritated that they tried to kidnap us or something. Plus they did this to Hiromi. Can't just let that one go, I said, and Akari just nodded happily. As usual, the woman did things in her own way. You should all be really happy. The Oni was so angry when he got a text from his sweet little killer Minimoto that he almost raced right over. I got sent instead, saving all of you from having your heads ripped off. Akari called out, laughing a bit like it was a joke. It was not a joke. June had ripped that Borg's head off after all. I had even been there. Of course the room was chilled at Akari's words, but the boss was still coughing as he slowly rose back up. Kotoniki apologizes to Ansan. He offers going back into a bar. It took me a moment to remember that Yakuza used sister and brother to talk about each other sometimes. PFFT. It's not me you have to apologize to. Motoka here is kamikaze, you caused some serious trouble. Last I heard, Katsuragi-sama is getting a call from Fujimura-sama about this. Fujimura-sama doesn't like people touching things that belong to him after all, Akari said, and while I scowled at being called kamikaze I would let it go this time. Katsuragi-sama? What you think touching a kamikaze wouldn't get your boss involved? Akari asked, sounding amused. But that's not important to me. Motoko, you ready to go? Not quite, I said, standing up and tugging Hiromi up too. Walking her over to Akari. Hiromi, Akari. She's a bit crazy but cool. Akari, Hiromi. She is my best chum, and her parents are Arasaka. If anyone so much as scratches her, I kill everyone in this room. I say rather bluntly, pointedly looking at Akari and her tendency to poke people. Keep an eye on her for a second. Then I turned and, since things were cooled off, slammed a fist with all my might right into Kotoniki's face. The boss hadn't expected my own retaliation. Nor had he expected a 5'5" girl to hit like a truck. Thank you Body 7, Street Brawling 6, and Chrome Knuckles. He went down in a heap, and unlike when Akari hit him, he didn't get back up. Then I took another 3 steps before anyone could react and slammed a fist into Carter's stomach. The kid had been standing nearby, obviously too nervous to do anything until now. I wasn't feeling very gentle at the moment. I grabbed Carter by his ears and slammed his face into my knee. A crunch echoing out as that dropped the kid to the floor. I wasn't breathing heavy. I wasn't gritting my teeth. As far as anyone could tell looking at me, I was completely calm. And in a way I was. That didn't mean I didn't bend down and punch Carter in the face again. That's for calling me a cunt. I grabbed his stupid jacket, and wiped my knuckles free of his blood and stood back up. One more thing. I called out to the room. Where is the car this fucking gonk stole? It's mine now, I demanded, and the room went quiet as everyone sort of wondered what to do, most of them looking to Akari. I don't know why you gonks are looking at me. Motoko asked you a question, Akari said with a deadly smile on her plastic face. Out back. I can show you? Good. Come on Hiromi. Let's Delta. I grumbled, following the man out behind the shop where there was a back alley that had a line of cars lined up. I recognized the car that Richard wanted and nodded. The Thornton Colby Butte wasn't exactly what I would consider an expensive vehicle, but I guess it made sense. The back end of the normal Colby was removed and turned into a truck bed. Probably how the SLS had originally stolen all the shipments that they were so proud of. I popped the door, not surprised the alarm was broken, and after a few seconds found that Carter or the other kids had already hotwired the damn thing. With a roll of my eyes I got it running. I didn't even need to actually rely on my limited tech knowledge. The hotwiring job was obvious and shit. But not my problem. Hiromi slipped into the passenger seat quietly, but before I could take off Akari was leaning down into the window. Lot of trouble for a piece of shit. Tell me about it. Thanks. I didn't really want to murder a bunch of gonks. Yes you did, Akari said with a knowing smile. Jun-kun will fuss over you, and Fujimura-sama will want a meeting. Great. I grumbled and Akari chuckled. Go on kid, I'll deal with the nonsense here. We'll meet up again soon. Probably sooner than you'd like, she said, stepping back, and I frowned but nodded as I drove back to the apartments, sending a message for my quadra to head there as well. Hiromi took care of giving Richard the car back. I hadn't wanted to talk to the gonk after everything, and in the end I drove her home. Both of us were pretty quiet on the way, but to my surprise Hiromi didn't just get out when I reached her home. Come up with me. There's something I still need to do, she demanded, and I looked surprised at her sudden aggressiveness. Hiromi, I know. You have to go talk to June and deal with Fujimura whatever. But come up first, she demanded, and I sighed and ended up following her up to her high-end apartment. To my surprise, unlike before, it seemed empty now. I guess her parents would be back at work with the gang war over. But she dragged me into her room, and pushed me into a chair before heading into the bathroom. coming out with a medkit. I almost snorted, but Hiromi was looking so serious, I kept my amusement hidden as she sat beside me and started fussing over me. "You don't have to do that," I told her, but she just shook her head, her hair flying around at the harshness of the motion. "I do. So just sit there and let me make up for my screw-up," she ordered, and who was I to argue with Hiromi being this serious? I didn't need much really. I was mostly bruised on my cheek, and probably on my stomach, but Hiromi sprayed some sort of gunk on my cheek anyways. It did numb my skin, so that was nice, but not really needed. I didn't even notice the pain. I messed up, got hot-headed, thought it was like it always had been, that I could just mouth off to the stupid claw gonks and get on with it. I didn't even think that you wouldn't want to start killing them. So I mouthed off. They were being idiots, trying to intimidate two girls that were there for business. It was dumb. I added my own frustration with the whole scenario coming out. They were just acting like people act. I wouldn't be happy if someone came up to me and started demanding you give back the netrunning gear or something, she said, playing devil's advocate. Hey, I looted that clear. I know you gonk, Hiromi said, shaking her head as she worked on putting a bandage on my cheek. Silly Hiromi, I didn't need a bandage for a bruise, but she was fussing so I allowed it. But I mean, I walked in not thinking, and then got frustrated. I guess I expected them to treat me like they always did. Just another TC hanger-on, but I'm not dressed like that anymore. I came in looking like an enemy. They shouldn't have done that anyways. You don't conduct business by messing with people like that, I argued, shaking my head. We'll just make sure we have more muscle or something next time. Yeah, Hiromi offered, nodding, and then she reached out and double-checked my bruise. Sorry, it doesn't even hurt. Besides, it gave me a good excuse to punch them back. Very satisfying. My joke managed to earn a giggle from Hiromi, and it seemed to help her finally calm down. Want to come over? We could do a sleepover, I offered. Considering her parents weren't around, Hiromi might not want to be alone at the moment. She hesitated before nodding. I have some school stuff I have to do first, so give me a few hours and I'll come over. Sounds preem. Of course, hanging out with Hiromi had to end eventually. I headed home, expecting to see June already there. I had texted him that Akari took care of everything and we were good during the earlier drive, but when I got home it was empty. So I shrugged, sent June a text telling him I was home, grabbed something to eat and decided to do some programming while I waited. Reboot optics was definitely more complicated than ping, and the time it was taking for me to fix it was definitely proving that the lines of code were filling in pretty quickly in the grand scheme of things. I mean, most modern hacks are probably designed by committee in some corp rather than being free range like what I was doing, but while they could get things done faster, I could do it better. Maybe. Probably. I was still only at level 10, and I was still going under the assumption that level 20 was the max. So I was only halfway there. But I was still an amazing programmer. Level 10. The human peak. My fingers blazed across the keyboard. The lines I wrote were clean, and the few errors I made were easily caught and fixed with debug. I was never stumped. I never hit a point where I had to wonder what the next line of code should look like. It all came to me before I was even ready. And so spent a few hours creeping closer to a finished program. The door opening made me glance up, my voice already about to greet June, but it wasn't June. Hey Hiromi. I called out instead, realizing that it was getting late, and June hadn't come by. Weird. Motoko. Hiromi greeted with a smile, seemingly much recovered from the scare. What you doing? Programming. I'm working on streamlining a quick hack, I explained, showing her the laptop screen which was just displaying line after line of code. That's preem. I have no idea what I'm looking at though. It's fine, I should take a break anyways. I've been pretty good about hyper-focusing on my coding. Want to put on some terrible TV? Yep. I brought snacks, she chirped, showing a bag full of all sorts of random stuff. And so thanks to horrible TV and snack food, everything was good. Hiromi was passed out snoring on my shoulder on the couch. I had muted the TV but left it running for the extra light. The ability to skip sleeping was still one of those super useful side features of the gamer system. I had pulled up my programming laptop to work with after Hiromi fell asleep. I hadn't been in the mood to sleep myself, so I worked instead. It was to this scene that June suddenly walked into. I blinked. It was nearly 3 in the morning. I expected June to have slept wherever he was, like he tended to do when he didn't come home. We both looked at each other. June looked like he wanted to say something, but after noticing Hiromi he just nodded and didn't speak. Instead he walked over quiet as a mouse thanks to his lynx paws, and knelt down gently patting my head as he looked me over. I could see the anxiety on his face, that look of anger and frustration. But I wasn't going to let June just walk away. So I called him. Literally. My eyes went gold as I could hear the ringing in my head. I'm okay June, so is Hiromi. Thanks for helping us out. I didn't really want to murder a bunch of TC guys. It would have caused trouble. You should have killed them. All of them. They shouldn't have touched you. He responded back without hesitation, his face angry. I shook my head, reaching out and patting him on the head in return just like he had just done for me. There were better reasons not to jump to murder. What's his face? Was a jerk, but it's fine. I hope Fujimura didn't cause you too many problems. I was sent to Sensei to cool off. Fujimura wasn't happy that I wanted to go and rescue you, he said, and I snorted quietly. What Fujimura wasn't happy with was June definitely planning to murder all the TC guys that ran that base. I punched him pretty hard after. So we're square. I inform him with a quiet thumbs up. And June finally rolled his eyes, a bit of amusement shining through his expression. Good. Next time someone threatens you, just flatline them. If they are TC, I'll take care of smoothing everything out, he tells me, and I smirk a bit. I'll be careful. Next time I have to speak to a gang, I'll either go in better armed so I'm more of a threat, or I'll bring more muscle for the same reason. June just shakes his head. I'd prefer if you didn't go into a gang base at all. But Motoko will Motoko. You always do. You love me, I told him, smirking as he scoffed and ruffled my hair but stood up, heading to his room. But I love you more. It wasn't until he was fully in his room that the call finally ended, but of course he still sent it. Love you too. Hiromi was kind of clingy in her sleep. At some point she had grabbed onto me instead of just drooling on my shoulder, and I had to fight off the grasping hands of my best chum. Thankfully programming was quiet, and I didn't wake her while I worked slowly adding more and more to my reboot optics hack. Oh man. If Yoko thought my ping was cool, this was going to blow her processor. Hacker humor. Since I was a hacker I needed to practice it. But eventually the sun rose up and it started getting bright enough that Hiromi was grumbling and shifting in her sleep. Slowly she started waking up, lazily shifting and contorting as her body tried to wake up, but she fought it. Until eventually I felt her hand squeeze my stomach twice as if her brain realized she was wrapped around something, and she glanced up, eyes blearily open, to see my own eyes looking down at her. Then she let out a squeak and leapt away. Which of course sent her over the end of the couch and onto the floor. I had tried to grab her, but she flailed quite hilariously, as she went right over the edge of the couch, disappearing from sight. Hiromi? You alright? Never better. She called out after a few moments as I peeked over the edge of the couch. She was looking up at me from the floor, one foot still up on the couch cushion she had just tripped over, and the rest of her in a mess on the floor, seemingly desperate for no one to notice her current state. Okay, I said, drawing it out, but instead of helping I just edged back over the couch and took my spot. It took a few moments for her foot to disappear over the edge of the couch completely, and a few moments after that for her to rise up and brush herself off. Morning. She greeted casually as if everything that had just happened never did. Good morning. Hungry? Still full of snacks, I think, she said, casually retaking her seat and slowly running her fingers through her hair, trying to reorganize the mess of bed head. She was failing, so I reached over and helped untangle a bit of her hair, letting it go flat. She was so embarrassed about her messy hair she went red. How cute. In the end Hiromi had cleaned up and gotten dressed not long after, and as much as she wanted to stay she had to head home. So I went back to programming until June woke up. My brother was just as bleary as Hiromi had been, and while his hair wasn't as long as Hiromi's mohawk style, it was still standing up in the back. "Sleep well, Jun-ni." "Where's Hiromi?" he asked in turn, looking around. "Went home already," I told him, and he nodded, rubbing the back of his head as he yawned. "Slept okay. You?" Hiromi's a bit of a grabby sleeper," I told him, instead of telling the truth that I hadn't slept at all. "Hey," he chuckled as if that was a joke and not just the damned truth. Pretty sure I still had a red handprint on my thigh from where Hiromi had wrapped herself around my leg. It's a good thing she didn't have chrome hands, that could have hurt. "Fujimura-sama wants to see you today. To talk about what happened." June offered, and I scowled as I pretended to ignore him, focusing on the laptop. "I'm not a damn dog. That jerk can't just summon me when he wanted." "I think you should see him, Motoko. He wants to apologize." "What?" I asked, jerking up at that. "Why would he want to apologize?" "Motoko, you've helped out the TC a bunch, saved one of our bosses. Remember? If one of our members assaults you, that's a big deal. A huge black mark. Fucks up our GRE bad." I frowned. I guess that made sense. I mean, I hadn't expected the sudden sort of kidnapping from them either. "Fine, I guess." "Great. Why don't you get ready? I'll need a shower first," he grumbled, heading into the bathroom. "All right. Code more later. Deal with pseudo-yakuza boss first." June refused to let me drive, so I was stuck on the back of his bike as he drove us to our destination. Where? No idea. In fact, I suppose this would be the first time I've been to June's work since the whole casino thing. And I knew he didn't work there anymore. I doubted he would ever want to return to that place. So we drove across the bridge into Watson, but unlike how I would usually turn down into Kabuki, we kept going to head into Little China. We got off the freeway, and were basically instantly turning into a small strip mall-type place. It honestly reminded me of the tattoo parlor. Similar setup. Take over a business, surround it with TC members, and the place gets locked down and income comes streaming in. This time it was more like an alleyway marketplace. Stalls set up along the walls of the very slim walking path, hawking everything from food to weapons if what I saw was right. June parked in the parking lot outside it and waved me to follow, which I did. It was pretty easy to follow along through the crowd. June's bulk easily made a path. Well, that and the respect people had for him. I saw plenty of TC gangers nodding their head to June, or calling out greetings, usually calling him Oni. I guess June was pretty popular. We walked through nearly the entire rally before June walked up to a door that looked the same as any other and opened it, revealing a set of stairs downwards. "Come on, Motoko." Yeah. I confirmed, following along. It wasn't like a little darkness was going to worry me. The stairs curved at the bottom, opening up to a bar of all place. It reminded me of all those little dark Japanese bars you would see in anime. A man behind the counter, bottles of alcohol behind him. All wood and dark leather. I crinkled my nose at the smoke. Apparently there wasn't a non-smokers section. Hell, this place was so old-fashioned there was even a little piano in the corner. Of course, I also noticed everyone inside was TC. Tattoos, weapons, attitudes, all screamed Tiger Claw. Men and women. Sitting around the bar, the tables, a few in booths set along the darkened corners. It was surprisingly full, but then again, I doubted this was actually a bar at all. If Fujimura worked out of here, then this wasn't a bar but probably the nerve center of the TC in the area. I followed June down into the carpeted floors. I was getting plenty of looks, but none were hostile. To my surprise, though, I didn't recognize anyone. I thought I would, but I guess most of the kamikaze hadn't continued working solely with Fujimura after the war. Junikiru. Howard. June was greeted by the barkeep, who was doing the most stereotypical bartender things and rubbing a glass with a rag. "Fujimura-sama will be back soon, take the private booth," Howard the bartender offered as he settled a glass down onto the drying rack and walked over to seemingly prepare some drinks. "Come on, Motoko," June called as he led me past the bar towards a back area. It was gloomy at first, but more of those bead curtains just blocked the light from a set of private booths that, as June waved me into one, was well lit by a few ornate faux candles around the booth. This doesn't strike me as very TC. No neon? I'm almost disappointed. It was originally a bar owned by a smaller gang that controlled this area. When it was taken over, the decor ended up being something a few of the guys liked, and so it stayed the same. June offered as he settled into his booth seating. You want anything? Not really. I shook my head, and it was true. The stink of cigar and cigarette smoke filled the air, killing my thirst and hunger. Sorry, June grumbled, noticing the way my nose was crinkled. It is what it is. So Fujimura should be here soon, June offered just as the beads were parted and the bartender dropped off a tray of drinks. More drinks than just for June and I? June nodded and even took a tumbler of something amber himself. You aren't going to drive home if you drink, I inform him, and June actually hesitates before scowling at me and taking a drink. You can call your car then. I'm not riding bitch on my own bike. Hey, I chuckled, giving him a lopsided smile as I imagined June, the big tough guy that he is forced to ride behind his little sister cause he was too drunk to drive. I'll drive you home in my quadra. You can call for your bike. No way, he grumbled, and I just rolled my eyes at June. I would force him to drive home with me if he drank too much. Even if his chrome probably would protect him from most driving accidents. In the end we both were just sort of waiting. I'm bored, I told June after about 20 minutes of sitting around. Just be patient. Fujimura-sama is a busy man. I rolled my eyes, not because I didn't believe him. I am sure a TC boss like Fujimura probably was busy. But what did that have to do with me being bored? You got about a minute before I start doing something to relieve my boredom, I informed June, and then started mentally counting down to June's concerned face. Minutes up, I said as I stood up, avoiding June's grasping hand as he tried to keep me in the booth as I stepped out back onto the bar floor. Mentally I went through my options. The street market upstairs could have something interesting, but I pretty much already had everything I wanted. I stopped. Piano. I've never played a piano before.